Let me ask you a question. How would you feel to wake up tomorrow with your absolute 10 out of 10 dream body? Imagine the muscle definition, the obvious six-pack, the wide shoulders, and the small waist. Also imagine what your day-to-day life would look like. People respect you more, they become nicer to you, you get more attention, compliments, and validation from people. Life is just good. The problem, I'm guessing, is that this is not what you currently have or see in the mirror. You're actually quite far from it. You don't have the muscle definition or the obvious six-pack, nor do you have the wide shoulders and the small waist. You might not have the respect or the attention from others you desire to have, and you wish you could have these things in your life. Now I can tell you that going from a shit starting point to a much better physique doesn't have to be complicated. So in this video I want to share with you a complete roadmap you can follow step by step to build that aesthetically pleasing physique so many people look up to, and I've divided this video into multiple chapters. First, we'll cover the individual phase you should go on to get the best visual difference in your physique. Second, we'll cover the Triad of Progress, which will cover the 3 most important variables you need to maximize the physical progress you make. Third, we'll cover how you can maximize your diet to build as much muscle as possible and lose as much fat as possible. Fourth, we'll go deep into how you can maximize muscle growth and which muscles you should be focused on to get that V-shaped look. Fifth, we'll cover the main recovery fundamentals so you can maximize the muscle you build and fat you burn. Then we'll cover how much time it will actually take you to achieve your desired results. And then finally, I'll walk you through an exact step-by-step plan you can follow for the first 90 days of your journey, so you can simply turn your brain off and execute. Now, I don't want you to treat this video like any other you've seen on the same subject. Treat it like a mini course you just bought. Save it, keep it somewhere, treat it like the last video you'll ever need to see on this subject. Put it on full screen, stop looking at these suggested videos for once in your life, focus and actually learn something. So realistically, there's 3 main phases you can choose from: a bulking phase, a cutting phase, and a recomposition phase. The goal of a bulking phase is putting on as much muscle as possible while minimizing fat gain. The goal of a cutting phase is losing as much fat as possible while minimizing muscle loss, and the goal of a recomposition phase is building muscle and losing fat at the same time, but maximizing neither of them. So here's a chart with 3 types of bodies. First is a skinny type. In this case, you lack a lot of muscle, but you're very lean as well. Think younger David Lade or Joe Fazer. Second is a skinny fat type. This is where you lack a lot of muscle and have too much fat covering it as well. This is the worst position you can start in my opinion. And third is a fat type. In this case, you have a good amount of muscle, but it's covered in a lot of fat as well. What I want you to do is determine which one resembles you the most, and based on that, choose the phase that will fit you the best. If you're the skinny type, you'll see the most visual benefits by first going on a bulking phase. You'll gain some fat, but the muscle build will make your physique look way different. If you're the fat type, you'll see the most visual benefits by first going on a cutting phase. You'll lose some muscle, but the lost fat will make a significant visual difference. Now, if you're the skinny fat type, you'll see the biggest visual difference with a combined cutting and bulking phase. The issue with being in this stage is that there's no clear problem. Fat people have enough muscle, but too much fat. In this case, the clear problem is too much fat. Skinny people have a low enough body fat percentage but not enough muscle. In this case, the clear problem is not enough muscle. Skinny fat people, however, have too much fat and not enough muscle, which means a combination of both a cutting phase and bulking phase is necessary. Now, whether you start with a bulking or a cutting phase depends on what your primary goal is. Do you care more about getting bigger, stronger, and putting on size? Or do you care more about getting lean, getting more muscle definition, and have more visual progress? In case you care more about getting bigger and stronger, I would start with a bulking phase first and then follow with a cutting phase. In case you care more about getting leaner and getting more muscle definition, I would start with a cutting phase first and then follow with a bulking phase. In both cases, the end result is the same. The most important aspect is to choose a phase and stick with it for long enough. Try and avoid the mistake I made where I'm starting a bulking phase, but then 2 weeks later I'm back in a cutting phase. You need to stick to a phase for a long enough time frame to actually start to see results. Ideally stick with 2 to 4 months for each phase and then consider what you should do next. Do you still find yourself too skinny? Keep bulking. Do you still find yourself too fat? Keep cutting. Stick with the phase that will give you the best visual difference and stick with it for 2 to 4 months, then consider what phase you'll go on to next. So making a successful body transformation really comes down to a combination of 3 main things: nutrition, training, and recovery, and those 3 variables done over a long enough time frame. Now, I know that this sounds very basic and simple, but building an aesthetic body really comes down to these 3 things done well, and these things done well over and over again over a long enough time frame. So the next 4 chapters will be dedicated to explaining those 3 factors in detail and for how long you'll need to perform those things. So the first factor of our Triad of Progress is diet. Diet, as we know, is a very important factor to make progress during our journey. We'll divide diet into multiple sub-chapters. First, the fundamental factors of weight loss and weight gain. Second, how to determine your maintenance calories. Third, your ideal caloric intake for your specific phase. Fourth, your ideal macronutrient intake for your specific phase. And fifth, tracking your nutrition over time. First, the fundamental factors of weight loss and weight gain. People often refer to a hierarchy of importance for those factors. Note that this hierarchy is only for weight gain and weight loss and doesn't include what is best for health or physical performance. So there's 5 levels to this pyramid. At the very bottom, we have energy balance, which is the difference between our caloric intake and caloric expenditure. This is about 50% of weight gain or weight loss success. The layer above represents our macronutrient intake. This is approximately 30% of weight gain or weight loss success. The third layer is our micronutrient intake. This only accounts for about 10% of weight gain or weight loss success, and the last 2 layers, which are meal timing and supplementation, each represents 5% of weight gain or weight loss success. When we examine which factors have the greatest impact on our ability to lose weight or gain weight, we can see that 80% of the results come from managing our calories and macros the right way, so I'll put my attention on those 2 things. So second, how to determine your maintenance calories. So before we begin, we first need to determine what our maintenance calories are. This simply represents the amount of calories we need to consume in order to maintain our current weight. So there's really 2 methods you can use for this: a calorie calculator and a 2-week experiment. If you're more of a lazy type as I am, simply use a calorie calculator to measure your maintenance caloric intake. Most of the time, it won't be very accurate, but it gets the job done. If you realize that your weight is going up or down a bit too much, reduce or increase the amount you consume until your weight stabilizes. The second method is a 2-week experiment you'll run. Here you will simply measure your maintenance caloric intake with that same calorie calculator, weigh yourself first thing in the morning to have your starting weight, then stick with that amount for 3 to 4 days. After those couple days, weigh yourself first thing in the morning again and see how your weight has adapted. Has it increased? Has it decreased? Or has it remained the same? In the case it increased, reduce your caloric intake by 250 to 500 depending on how much it increased. In the case it decreased, increase your caloric intake by 250 to 500 depending on how much it decreased. And if you maintained your weight, keep that same caloric intake. Then you want to run that new caloric amount for another 3 to 4 days, see how your weight has changed and adapt your intake accordingly. Repeat that exact same process one last time and you should have found your maintenance caloric intake. So again, if you're more of a lazy type, simply stick with a calorie calculator. You can find one in the description, and if you're more determined, you can run that quick experiment. Now let's be honest, most of us will just use a calorie calculator and that's okay. I would have done the same thing. So third, measure your ideal caloric intake for your specific phase. So once we have our approximate maintenance caloric intake, we need to adapt that caloric intake for our specific phase. Remember, in the first section, we've decided what phase would bring you the most visual difference. If you were more on the skinny side, a bulking phase would be most ideal. If you were more on the fat side, a cutting phase would be best. And if you were more on the skinny fat side, a combination between a cutting phase and bulking phase would be best suited. So I want you to simply follow these recommendations. If you'll go on a bulking phase first, follow this formula. Maintenance caloric intake plus 500 calories equals bulking caloric intake. If you'll go on a cutting phase first, follow this formula. Maintenance caloric intake minus 500 calories equals cutting caloric intake. Don't overcomplicate this too much. If you're the skinny fat type and need to combine a cutting and bulking phase, again, simply determine which one you'll go on first and follow the exact same guidelines. Number 4, measure your ideal macronutrient intake for your specific phase. So once we've adapted our caloric intake for our specific phase, we need to adapt our macronutrient intake as well. There's a total of 3 macronutrients: protein, fats, and carbs. In terms of importance for muscle growth, protein comes first, fat second, and carbs last. The reason carbs come in last place is simply because we do not need them for survival. There's enough people on a keto or carnivore diet to prove this. Fats are then still necessary for some muscle building processes, but are most important for the production of hormones and general health. Then protein comes in first place because of its obvious role in muscle building. So how much protein should you take in on a daily basis depending on your specific phase? Just like with calories, simply follow these recommendations. If you'll go on a bulking phase first, follow this formula. Body weight in pounds times 0.7 to 1 equals daily protein intake in grams. If you'll go on a cutting phase first, follow this formula. Body weight in pounds times 1 to 1.2 equals daily protein intake in grams. The reason why you can get away with less protein during a bulking phase is because your body already has plenty of energy reserves it can pick from, and because of that there tends to be much less protein breakdown. During a cutting phase, however, you tend to need slightly more protein because you have less carbs and fat to use as energy, and therefore some of the protein you'll consume will be used as energy. There's arguments going around that you don't need that much protein on a cutting phase and that you can get away with lower amounts, but I personally wouldn't risk it and still go with that amount if it isn't too much of a struggle to get it in every day. Now the second macro is fat. In this case, regardless of whether you go on a bulking or cutting phase, you'll need a minimum of 50 grams per day. That is the equivalent of 3 eggs, 1 avocado, and 100 grams of salmon, or a 250 gram steak. This should be quite simple. Now, the rest of your calories can come from any source you like. Carbs, fat, protein, it doesn't matter. The recommendations for protein and fat are the minimum amount you should get every day, but you can absolutely go above that number if you desire to. So last and number 5, tracking your diet over time. So the last important variable of our diet is tracking it over time. In order to get the amount of calories and macros we need on a daily basis and not go above or below that amount, we have to get good at tracking it. Here again, don't overcomplicate things. You'll download an app called MyFitnessPal, weigh your food when you make it, and write it down in the app. It will then give you the total amount of calories and macros for that food. This will take some time before you get used to this, but after a while, it will become habitual and it won't take you a lot of effort on a daily basis. Again, I want you to keep these things very simple and straightforward. Find your maintenance caloric intake, adapt it to the phase that would suit you the best, adapt your protein intake to that phase as well, and make sure you track your food intake properly until it becomes habitual. Make at least 80% of your food clean and the rest can be whatever. By the way, if you want me to help you implement all these principles, there's a link down below. Check it out if you want. Training is the second factor to our Triad of Progress. We'll again divide this into multiple sub-chapters. First, how muscle growth actually works. Second, how to maximize your training for muscle growth. Third, how to progressively overload your workouts. Number 4, which muscles to focus on to create a V-shape. And fifth, how to track your progress over time. Number 1, how muscle growth actually works. So before we move on to how we can maximize our training to maximize muscle growth, I believe it's important we understand how it works to begin with. We can boil down muscle growth to 5 different variables: a stimulus, water, protein, energy or calories, and rest. A stimulus is a stress you put on the muscle to give it a reason to grow. Water is necessary in any process in the body. Energy simply means calories. You need enough calories to actually grow. Protein, and specifically the amino acids within protein, are the building blocks of a muscle, and during rest is when the muscle is being repaired and grown bigger and stronger. As you might have noticed, the first component has to do with training, the following 3 have to do with diet, and the last one has to do with recovery. Since all the aspects of diet have been covered in the previous section and rest will be covered in the next section, this chapter will fully focus on the training aspect of things. So second, how to maximize your training for muscle growth. When it comes to creating a stimulus for muscle growth during the time we train, it again comes down to 3 main factors: frequency, intensity, and volume. Frequency simply represents the amount of training sessions done per week, intensity represents how hard you train and how difficult sets feel, and volume is how much sets you do per week, reps you do per set, and weight used during those sets. In terms of frequency, we know that a muscle needs to be trained at least twice a week, and this because of 2 reasons. First is because our muscles often don't need more than 48 to 72 hours to fully recover, and second is because it allows you to split your total volume across 2 sessions, meaning you'll have more quality work every session. The best splits you can adopt for this are either a push-pull legs, upper-lower, or full body split. All of them should allow you to hit each muscle group at least twice a week. You can find workout plans for each down below. In terms of intensity, the only thing you should remember is to take every work in sets you do close or to complete failure. Failure being when you can't complete another rep despite literally almost dying trying to get that last 1 rep. Then finally, in terms of volume, we need to find the ideal amount of sets per week and ideal amount of reps per set. We know that 5 to 20 hard sets, so the ones taken to failure or close to it, per muscle group per week is ideal. If you're a complete beginner, you want to stick to 5 to 10 hard sets at most, and if you're slightly more advanced, you can dive into the 10 to 20 hard set range. Also, smaller muscle groups like biceps or calves need less volume than bigger muscle groups, so slightly adapt the amount of volume you do for those muscle groups. Now next, we need to discuss which rep range will maximize muscle growth. There's often a lot of conflicting ideas about rep ranges. Some seem to think that 3 to 8 reps is ideal, others say 8 to 12 is ideal, and others claim that 12 to 20 reps is the best. So what is it? The truth is that rep ranges can go very wide and still be effective. From research, we know that rep ranges as low as 3 up until 30 can cause similar muscle growth at the condition that the intensity is high enough. The amount of reps doesn't really matter as long as you're training close to failure. Now, there are a couple caveats. First is that when you start to go too light in weight and too high in reps, you will see a lot less growth even if you go to failure. Second is that very low rep ranges have a higher chance of injury. When you push a bigger load, it puts more pressure on your joints and therefore have more chances of getting injured. And finally, third is that even though higher reps can still be effective for muscle growth, they can get long, boring, and also be harder than lower weights. So even though you can go higher or lower in reps, I would still recommend people to stick between 8 and 15 reps. So as a quick summary, train each muscle group twice a week, take sets close or to complete failure, perform 5 to 20 hard sets per muscle group per week depending on how advanced you are, and stick with a rep range going from 8 to 15 reps. Now third, how to progressively overload your workouts. Now we need to determine how to progressively overload our workouts. We know that our muscles get used to a certain level of stimulus or stress over time, so in order to keep growing a muscle, it needs to be put under a bigger and bigger stimulus. Just like with everything, I'll keep things very simple and straightforward. In order to progressively overload your workouts, simply think about increasing one of two variables: the weight used or the reps done per set. These are essentially the only two variables you should think about increasing. You could technically increase the intensity or add intensity methods, but that becomes much more complicated to track over time. So the easiest way you can increase both variables is the following. Let's say you're doing barbell bicep curls. This is what progressive overload would look like. In the first week, you would do 12 reps with 20 kg. In the second week, you would add 1 rep with the same weight. In the third week, you would add another rep with the same weight. In the fourth week, you would go up to 15 reps with that same weight. And in the fifth week, you would go back to 12 reps but increase the weight you use. In my opinion, this is one of the easiest ways you can progressively overload your training. Stick between a certain rep range, increase the amount of reps you do over time. Once you get to the highest rep count within that rep range, go back to the lower end, but increase the weight used. Progressive overload shouldn't be complicated or confusing. Once you've defined your workouts per week, sets per workout, reps per set, and weight used during those sets, don't touch the frequency or sets of the workout, and simply increase the reps done per set and weight used during those sets. Number 4, which muscles to focus on to create a V shape. The next step is to identify the muscles that will truly make a difference in the way your body looks. On our body, we have certain muscles that create a V shape and an aesthetically pleasing look much more than others. In total, there's 4 main muscles that should be focused on: neck, back, with more emphasis on upper traps and mid-back, upper chest, and shoulders. Now, obviously, you don't want to neglect other muscle groups, and it's very important we build a balanced physique, but if our primary goal is to have that V shape, these muscle groups are the most important thing to focus on. Down below, you'll be able to find training programs you can simply follow and are specifically designed for pure muscle growth and also focus on the 4 main aesthetic muscles. Now fifth, how to track your progress over time. The final step is about tracking the progress we make over time. This is important mainly because it allows us to much more easily apply progressive overload and thus make progress in a much more consistent way. It also allows us to recognize when we've been stagnating for a while, and we can therefore make adjustments faster. So there's really 2 variables we can track: our body composition and our strength. Our body composition can be tracked in 3 ways: by weighing ourselves, taking progress pictures, and measuring individual muscles. If you weigh yourself, this should be done on a daily basis to build a habit out of it, and should be done first thing in the morning, before drinking or eating anything, and after peeing or taking a shit. You essentially want to create very similar conditions every time you weigh yourself. If you take progress pictures, I would recommend you do this once a week or every day if you have the time. Some people prefer this option. And just like weighing yourself, you ideally want to do it first thing in the morning, completely fasted, and in the exact same lighting. Now, if you want to measure individual muscles to see whether they're growing or not, this should only be done once or twice a year. Growing a muscle takes a very long time and won't happen in an instant. The only place where it would make sense is measuring your waist if your main goal is fat loss. This can be done once or twice a month to see whether you're actually losing size around your waist. If you have no idea how to go about it, you'll be able to find plenty of resources for that online. In terms of strength, I would advise you don't go for too many personal records, as it will increase your chances of getting injured, and strength isn't our main goal when trying to build that aesthetic physique. What I would advise you do is track your general strength over time, because there is a strong correlation between your level of strength and muscle mass, and the best way to track general strength is by tracking how much volume you've done during a workout. So the way you ideally want to do this is by following a couple steps. First, grab a method of note-taking. You can use a piece of paper, workout book, strength tracking app, Excel file, and so on. What you use really depends on your personal preference. I always used to write it down in a workout log and did it that way. You might like to write it down on your phone, for example. You might just want to consider writing it down in something you can easily take to the gym. Something like a workout tracking book or your phone's notes can easily be taken to the gym. If you want to track your workouts in an Excel file or on your computer, you won't be able to track the workout during the workout itself. Second is to define the day of your split. Once you choose your method of tracking, the first thing you'll have to do is write down the specific day of the split you run. For example, if you're currently on a push-pull legs (PPL) split, you might write push day or pull day down. If you're running an upper-lower split, you might write upper day down. Third is to track the workout. Once you've done those two steps, you'll actually have to track the workout you're doing. First, you want to write down 5 columns. The first one is for each exercise you'll do. That might be, for example, barbell bench press, back deck, push-ups, and so on. The second, third, fourth, and fifth column, you'll simply call them set 1, 2, 3, and 4. You don't need to do 4 sets per exercise, it's simply to put enough space just in case. In each case, you'll then write down how many reps with how much weight you have done. If you did 12 reps on the barbell bench press with 135 pounds, you'll then write down 135 times 12 in the set 1 column and bench press line. Repeat that process for every exercise you do and track every workout like this. The next time you'll have a push day, you'll be able to look back upon your workout and improve slightly. Down below, you'll be able to find a workout tracker template. So to summarize quickly, train each muscle group around twice a week, take all sets close or to complete failure, do around 5 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, ideally stick between the 8 to 15 rep range, make sure the amount of reps you do and weight you use is slowly increased over time, specifically focus on the muscles that create the illusion of a V-shape and track your progress over time. The third and last factor of our Triad of Progress is recovery. Without recovery, you won't ever give your body the ability to build muscle properly. I could go in much more depth for this, but I've decided to only mention one factor, which is sleep. This is our 20% bringing 80% of results in terms of recovery, if not 10% bringing 90% of results, which is why all of our attention should simply be focused on this. So how do we maximize our sleep? I feel like this will be a repetition of boring basics, but I really think these are the few things that should be kept in mind when it comes to sleep optimization. Step number 1, master your sleep cycle. We all have a sleep cycle, but many of us disrupt it by going to bed and waking up at different times. Your ability to recover isn't only based on sleeping enough, but also about sleeping at the same time each day or night. Step number 2, optimize cortisol release in the morning. Each morning we have a natural cortisol spike that happens automatically to wake us up. In order to create a better sleep cycle, we have to optimize that natural cortisol release in the morning. There's 3 things we can do for this: light exposure, preferably sunlight, cold exposure, and movement. There are probably a few other things, but these will bring you most of the results. In terms of light exposure, sunlight will be best, but artificial bright lights will be enough if you don't have access to sunlight. Cold exposure could be a cold shower, cold bath, or walking in a cold weather. This combines sunlight and cold exposure. And movement will be any form of exercise. Skipping, running, walking, doesn't really matter. Just choose what you prefer. You don't need to implement all of these things, just choose the things that you think you would enjoy the most. Step number 3, optimize melatonin release in the evening. Just as we have a natural cortisol release in the morning to wake us up, we also have a natural melatonin release in the evening to make us sleepy. The goal is to again optimize that natural melatonin release in the evening. There's again 3 things we can do for this: warm exposure, stretching, and meditation. In the morning, it is best to use cold exposure to wake us up. At night, it is optimal to use warm exposure to make us sleepy. A warm shower or warm bath will be best for this. Then stretching allows us to mentally and physically relax, and meditation will calm us down mentally. And finally, step number 4, a few things to keep in mind. To really optimize our sleep, there's a few things to be kept in mind and are the things we're always told to do. First, try and avoid blue light too late at night. Second, avoid eating too much food before bed, although I've done this for the longest time and it hasn't disturbed my sleep cycle. And third, avoid caffeine too late in the afternoon. So essentially, focus most on sleep, the rest doesn't really matter. To optimize your sleep, go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, optimize cortisol release in the morning and melatonin release in the evening, and make sure you respect some of the basic fundamentals when it comes to falling asleep at night. No caffeine, no blue lights, and not too much food. In this chapter, I want to give you a realistic time expectation because we often underestimate how much time building something good actually takes. I hear many people hoping to achieve their dream physique in 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year, when in reality it will most likely take much longer than this. How fast you can make progress will depend on a few things. First, your starting position. Second, your genetic predisposition to make progress. Third, the amount of effort you put in. Fourth, the mistakes you make along the way. And fifth, your ability to take consistent action. There's many different factors that determine the speed at which you'll make progress in this journey, so there's really no exact time frame I could give you here. However, assuming you don't make too many mistakes, that you stay relatively consistent along the way, and that you put in the needed effort, I can give you an estimation of 1 to 4 years to achieve a good aesthetically pleasing physique. Now again, if you do everything right, you have a decent starting position, and you're genetically predisposed to react well to training, you could achieve a very good physique in 6 months, but for most people, expect 1 to 4 years of time. For people whose goal is mainly about fat loss, expect it to take closer to 1 to 3 years of time, and for people whose goal is mainly about muscle gain, expect it to take closer to 2 to 4 years. So this section will give you a step-by-step plan of what you must complete in the first week, first month, and the second and third month. I'm not going into too much depth, but it should give you an idea of what should be done and when it should be done. Day 1 to 7. The first 7 days will really just be about discovery and setting things up in place. In terms of diet, we'll complete the following list of things in those first 7 days. First, define the phase that will suit you the best, a bulking phase, cutting phase, or recomposition phase. Second, roughly estimate your maintenance calories plus adapt them to your phase. Third, roughly estimate your minimum daily macronutrient intake. Fourth, define your meals of choice. Most of us have 5 to 10 meals we keep eating on rotation. Try to understand the nutritional amount of those meals and slightly adapt them to make them fit your nutritional needs. Fifth, download MyFitnessPal or any other app of your choice. And number 6, start practicing tracking calories and macros. In terms of training, you'll complete the following things as well. First, choose a pre-made training plan or plan you've got yourself already. Second, join a gym if you don't train at home or on calisthenics bars. Third, use the first week as practice to learn equipment usage, exercise technique, and get used to a gym environment. And number 4, take a progress picture and weight measurement. Day 7 to 30. The rest of the month will mainly be focused on building weekly and daily habits. You'll focus on the following things. First, develop daily food tracking habits. Second, get used to making your meals of choice. Third, adjust calories if needed. If you're not progressing as you wish, try to slightly adapt how much you're eating. Number 4, develop a habit of going to the gym. Number 5, get used to your training program. And number 6, slowly get used to the technique of exercises. Day 30 to 90. The following 2 months should really just be about slight adaptations made over time and keeping up the positive habits that have been built in the first month. During those 2 months, your goal is to, first, progressively overload your workouts. Second, keep tracking calories and macros. You can start to have a slightly more loose approach. And third, make slight adjustments to your diet and training if you need to. Day 90. On the 90th day, you'll take another progress picture and weight measurement to compare the progress you've made in those 3 months, and you'll decide whether you should keep running the phase you're currently doing or whether it's time to change phases. Now again, as I said in the time expectation section, you won't ever achieve your dream physique in 3 months, but I try to lay out a plan for those first 90 days to remove some confusion you might have. The last thing I'll ask you to do is to complete the document called Homework, which will help you implement all of the things mentioned in this video. So, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Leave a like, leave a comment. You'll be able to find all the resources down below in the description. And if you want me to help you implement all of these principles, there's also a link down below. Check it out if you want. You don't have to. Peace.